Hi everybody, I'm Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. If COVID had you thinking about how much you needed a pool at your home, ask the city of Lubbock how expensive a lot of water can be. And what may be the strongest Second Amendment rights bill ever in Texas, it's on its way to becoming law, but it also brings strong emotions on both sides of the issue.
From the studios of KAMC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Also this week, the kerfuffles. Every legislative session, lawmakers get tense and fuss about the other side of the building not passing their favorite bills, a lot of harsh words and hurt feelings that are always smoothed out in the end, unless they're not. Things getting awfully chippy at the Capitol now. Several of the lieutenant governor's priority bills fizzled out when House members decided to let a deadline on them come and go. So Dan Patrick did what politicians do these days. He hopped on Twitter saying the governor should call a special session in June, especially for his pet projects. The governor called that idea, quote, goofy. Lubbock Representative Dustin Burrows this week took time on the House floor to chat with Speaker Dade Phelan about how he thinks Patrick and the Senate brought this on themselves.
Mr. Speaker, is it true that the House sent 1,250 House bills to the Senate?
The chair is not specifically advised, but that sounds about accurate.
Is it also true that 100 of those bills were never even referred?
That sounds accurate.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Please state your inquiry.
That of the bills that actually were referred, 450 were never even considered in a Senate committee?
The chair is not advised, but that sounds accurate.
Yesterday, I believe both the House and Senate had local calendars, and there was a lot of kerfuffle over those. My understanding is...
The chair is not advised of a kerfuffle. The parliamentarians will research that.
Direct video evidence of kerfuffles. But it makes the point that this pillow fighting may bury bills Texans really need. As we sit here, bills to weatherize the state power grid and pay for backup power facilities have still not been passed, which makes this weekend's 70% switch to the ERCOT power grid a bit more tense here. But Lubbock leaders are full steam ahead on this, and they're looking to the future, as KAMC's Laura Lawhead shows us.
LPL appearing before City Council and the Electric Utility Board Thursday afternoon. The two bodies approving an agreement for early termination of LPL's 25-year power contract with Southwestern Public Service that tied Lubbock to the Southwest Power Pool.
A ton of work has been done since 2015 to get to this point.
The decision now allowing LPL to move the remaining 30% of its customers to the ERCOT power grid in what's projected to be May 2023. The first round of that move happening this weekend, with 70% of LPL's customers making the switch to ERCOT. LPL and Mayor Dan Pope calling Thursday's decision a milestone and a big step to bring retail electric competition back to the hub city and choices back to the customers. The contract began in 2019 and was set to end in 2044, costing LPL more than $17 million every year. To buy out, LPL will have to pay Southwestern Public Service a lump sum of $77.5 million in May 2023, after the final switch. It's something LPL says will actually save a lot of money. Until then, the two companies will keep working together. Now, the next step is to get approval from the Public Utility Commission of Texas for the second phase to connect the remaining 30% of LPL customers to ERCOT by its goal of 2023. Laura Lawhead, KAMC News.
And Laura, Lubbock Senator Charles Perry took a break from the Capitol kerfuffle mosh pit to talk to our Wes Rappaport and to anyone worried about this changeover in light of the winter storm problems.
First of all, time will probably tell, but it's probably a good move long term. That said, our grid is under capacity. There's no doubt. It's been under capacity. We haven't expanded a lot of generation capacity for years with the growth in Texas, and by design. We don't want to pay for excess capacity. We run an extremely efficient grid. So all of those factors have obviously surfaced in the legislation. We've got hopefully we're finding a different pricing metrics that will encourage more generation going forward to meet the demands in the peak and not do it at a $9,000 an hour rate. If there's looking back, the grid performed exactly as designed. What it didn't do was cut off $9,000 an hour billing for 32 hours. So we've dealt with that. We've addressed that. So going forward, the grid's going to be okay. We definitely need to do some things to shore up how we do price the grid, how we do encourage a new generation, how we prepare for the winter storms, including gas. You know, the gas was an issue because they have to curtail when they don't think they're going to have enough supply to meet demand, and when you do that, you've got to make sure you're not curtailing electric generators. So all those factors go into. We learned a lot. We've responded accordingly. The grid will provide. There's no doubt. Probably more vendors. When you have more vendors, then you should, in theory, get a more competitive rate. I guess I tell people the cows done got out, right? We were in the grid before the storm. We made those calls a couple of years back. We just now, as a legislature as well as a community, need to be prepared that it's not where it needs to be today, and I would fully expect to have some rolling blackouts when the heat of the summer hits. It's just part of the grid. It's not new to the grid. We've had rolling blackouts in Austin, Houston, and in bigger urban areas for years. It's just part of the process. Unfortunately, the question becomes, is it something that has to be part of the process? And that's when you get into conversation. Do you want your utility bill to pay for generation that you don't need? So it's that balance. We're trying to figure out what it is. We're not engineers. You know, we've allowed the process to go forward and try to find that happy balance where we don't pay for too much. We're really pretty close. We've got 107 megawatt capacity, but what is dispatchable, meaning we can actually access it when we need it, is probably in that 70 to 75 range. If we could just add another 10 at a minimum cost to where we may have to pay for it when we don't need it, I think that alleviates the problem. But we've taken a holistic approach to transforming or reforming the ERCOT.
What reassurances can you make that we won't see a repeat of what happened? You know, most of Lubbock's power didn't go out.
Right.
There are people in the district who are worried about that happening with this transition. What reassurances can you make to the people that are worried about that this won't happen? There's
no absolutes. There's nothing that I can guarantee 100% that if we had that same event today that Lubbock, Texas Power would go out or not. It didn't go out because we were under a different provider, correct? And we're under a provider that's in the national network. We're under a provider that we're the biggest enchilada in the food chain. So with that comes, I think, an emphasis on ability to gen. So the argument whether we should or shouldn't has already been had. It's done. I liked our prior provider. I've been on public record that they're a great community partner. We actually had taxable assets on the books in the community. So, you know, I'm not second guessing. I was just about as vocal, I guess, on are you sure you want to do it 5 years ago? That's already occurred. We've got a couple $100 million of transmission line in the ground. We owe, I think the last estimate I'm told, another $125 million to come into ERCOT. So we're there, we're here. Long term, it's probably the smart move. What does long term mean? I would say 10 years, it'll be a good move that we made it. Between now and then, I think the state's serious about making sure we have as minimum disruption to communities with power. You know, it's an economic engine, right? Companies don't want to move here if your power's going to look like California power. They have a lot of blackout, a lot of issues.
Is that your biggest concern?
Well, my biggest concern is we don't want people to die when their power doesn't go out. And people die from excessive heat, and they die from excessive cold. They die from not having food and water secured because generators can't pump good, clean water and food. So we've not been in an event where we go hungry. I will tell you the water issue in this was probably one of the talked about issues because we had a lot of communities that their generators didn't pump water supply because they hadn't been tested. So we've got rules now coming into place that you got to test your generators every so often to make sure they do work. So a lot of different factors, but if you asked what the number one priority is to make sure we have a secure, affordable, you know, if we get our power source so unaffordable, then we can have the same worries, right? People can't afford the utility bills and they go hungry and they go without heating or without cooling when they needed it.
So a lot to think about here. Senator Perry with our West Rap report. Straight ahead, more on this. The view from Representative John Frullo's chair. Plus, what the federal government is doing to possibly help pay for some of our power system upgrades. That's next on Talking Points.